Friday.
Great to be back with you, Liana.
Yeah.
Happy Friday. Happy
Happy
Friday to the
Friday.
audience, whoever's watching or watching later.
Now, I heard that you have some exciting news to share with us today.
Yeah, I think you
Or if
wanted me to
are you allowed to
mention
spill the
that
beans?
yeah, I'm going to be an ad skills coach and I'm excited about that. So I get to talk about tracking analytics and nerd stuff once a month on a webinar style format. So do a little, I think it's like 15 minutes, 15 20 minutes of content of some sort, whatever I think people want to know about, and then Q&A. So that'll be fun.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And
So,
you're an
if
ad skills coach as well.
I am an ad skills coach as well. I'm going to be covering social ads. So anybody who's
You're
in, and
the
it's not for every level, by the way, in ad skills. It's just for people who are in pro league.
Mhm.
And what is happening in October is I think this is for the price that you get in for Pro League. This is ridiculous. You get so much coaching in there now. There's going to be coaches on different topics, and Justin also coaches as well every month, so you can get all your questions answered. And he's basically, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting our own horns, but I know that he has kind of handpicked. He thought the best people for this, and I know that I'm constantly tagging you, Sunny. I know in anything related to analytics and Slack, and I always feel bad because I think I know it's so busy, but I literally don't know anybody else who can answer those questions.
I appreciate that. There are some other really good people in there, but if I can chime in, that's always nice.
So I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about, because you sent me a message and then I thought, that might be kind of fun for us to talk about it. You were asking me what my burning questions were for analytics, because that's what you're going to be teaching and coaching us on in ad skills. And I have so many questions. And if anybody is watching right now live, you can pop your question into the chat as well. And Sunny has agreed to be put on the spot for analytics
I figure it's good
questions.
practice, right?
Yes. So if you don't mind, can I dive in? Because I do have a bunch of questions.
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay. The first thing is I think the topic of the day, it seems right now, is iOS 15. And even if you're not an Apple user, it's still going to affect you. So do you want to just give us a brief kind of overview of why, like, really what happened with the latest update with Apple and how it's affecting, privacy, and then we can kind of dive in about how it's affecting analytics, because I'd also love to hear some of your thoughts about how you're going to pivot because of this.
Yeah. Are you specifically referring to the iOS issue that people are opting out of tracking?
Yes.
Yeah.
And some of the new features, right, that came out with iOS 15 about privacy. I don't know if you know all of them.
I actually don't. I haven't looked into all the details of
Okay.
iOS 15 versus like
Right.
I think it was 14.5 was the update. Was
Yeah.
that what 14
Okay,
point
so
something, right?
I'll fill everybody in. iOS 14, one of the big features that, at least as ad buyers and marketers, that affected us was when you're in on your phone or your iPad, when you're using apps, a message will pop up and say, "Will you allow this app to track you?" And I know that we talked a lot about this in Clubhouse. I remember when all the rumors started coming out, and I heard there was a lot of controversy too about the exact wording, because when it says, "Will you allow this app to track you?" Our assumption is most consumers will look at that, not really, really understand what it is, but nobody wants to be tracked. So they're going to say, no, don't allow. And what that's actually doing is it's telling Apple, hey, do not give any data about what this person does outside of Apple, because for everybody, when you don't have that turn on and they can track you, they know, hey, you were in this app, and then I went shopping for shoes, and then I bought groceries, and then ad buyers can actually use that information to give me relevant ads. So iOS 14, kind of a lot, I don't know the exact number, right? Maybe it's 80-90%. A lot of people opted out of it. And then in iOS 15, a lot of updates happened. One of them is there's now like a little option that you can say, do not use my email address. So Apple will put out like a spoofed email address, and then if I get any emails from apps, like, it will just forward it. So I have my personal Gmail attached to my Apple ID. And if I say, hey, like, basically spoof my email address, they will never see my actual Gmail address. They'll just get some fake address and then it'll just get forwarded to my Gmail account. So now you're not going to be able to track open rates and to each person because it's going to be these spoofed email addresses.
Oh, was that the iOS 15 update?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to look into that some more, but it makes sense because Apple is just on this quest to prove that they are like the privacy company. And I think it's partially a marketing play because I don't know that they really care as much, but they want to be seen as that company that does care. And they want to attract the people in the market who are now concerned about that. So it's really smart for them. At the same time, yeah, it's causing havoc for a lot of the marketers, and ultimately for the consumers themselves, they're not going to get nearly as good of an experience. They're not going to get the personalized ads that they've come to be used, they've become accustomed to,
Yes.
and then some of the other personalization from the apps themselves that they've become accustomed to because they're telling Apple, put this firewall between me and the app, even though I want to use the app. So over time, there might end up being some people opting back into being tracked, but overall, I hear one of my Facebook reps said that something like 95%, and she wasn't wanting to be too specific, but
Right.
she was kind of hinting at like 95% of people have opted out. So I don't know what the actual numbers are, but the numbers are apparently huge. I mean, and it makes sense that if you get a prompt where you have to specifically opt into tracking, most people are going to be like, no, I don't want to be tracked. They don't understand what the actual effects of not being tracked are. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone does opt back in, but I think as marketers, we have to assume that they're not going to. And I think to opt back in would not even be an easy thing to do. I think you'd have to go into the settings and find a way to opt back in. So they make it a lot easier to opt out than they do to opt back in.
Always, right?
Yeah.
So how have you adjusted your analytics since then? Like your approach
My
to
my
analytics?
analytics have not changed that much because I don't depend on the data that's in the ads manager itself. Like when you're in Facebook or in any ads platform, if you're looking at your data in there and looking at the number of conversions, it's never going to be totally accurate, or even it could be close to accurate. It could be like within 10%, 15%, 20%, something like that, depending on your setup. But a lot of that data, well, really all that data so far has been based on pixels firing on the consumer's device, whether it's a phone or their laptop or a tablet or whatever. And then that pixel firing goes and tells Facebook or tells Google or whatever ad network that something happened, whether it's a conversion or just someone scrolling the page, whatever it is. And it's just not accurate. So, because the pixel's not always going to fire, there's going to be technical issues. So I depend on what's in the CRM. Like if someone's opting in, and then it gets stored in our case, like HubSpot, but whatever CRM you're using, ActiveCampaign, whatever, you want to have that data and then send that data back to the ad network to say, this is what's in our CRM. And you can do that through Zapier, for example, with the Facebook Conversions API. Zapier has a setup where you don't have to code anything. You can just set that up to go like use the trigger as your CRM, like new contact added, or they're added to a list, whatever it is, as your trigger action. And then the action that follows the trigger would be Facebook Conversions API, and you're sending the data back. You want to send as much data as you can, email, phone number, and other things. The Facebook Click ID, although I noticed when you're using that Zap setup and you're optimizing for leads, which is a standard event in Facebook, you actually don't have to send back the Click ID, which is kind of strange because I'm not sure exactly how they're going to know who that person is, not based on the Click ID.
Well, you should know by now Facebook knows everything. So.
Yeah. I don't know why they wouldn't at least make it an optional thing, because that field in Zapier actually disappears when you choose lead.
Wow, very interesting.
It's just really weird. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, so that's the way I do it. It's CRM based, but then of course it raises the question like, well, what do you do when someone doesn't opt in? And then that, like, we're crippled in some ways from the change because pixels are more flexible. So Jonathan Wilson a couple months ago or a few months ago was asking in Pro League, and he's another smart guy with analytics, but we're all kind of asking the same question. Like, do we have to go back to more like the early 2000s approach where you get someone to opt in and like that's like a primary objective? And to some degree it's true, because otherwise it's hard to know. But yeah, I don't know if Facebook's going to make these things more flexible in the future where you can somehow capture their Click ID and then only send back their Click ID without an email address or anything else, because then that would act like a pixel as well.
That would be
So I don't
easier.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. But what do you do with other ad networks? I mean, there's Facebook. And so like, I guess just to back up a moment, basically what you've done is your main MO is you just take the data from the CRM and you send it back to the ad networks. And just assume that all the ad networks are wrong to a certain degree in terms of their
Well, they are.
data. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So
they
what
are.
about Google and TikTok and all these other ones? Do they all have an ability to send the data back from server to server the way you can do with Facebook?
They don't all have it yet. Like on TikTok, that is just coming up, and I definitely want to set that up with TikTok as well. Google has had it for a long time. Facebook has had it for quite a while. So
Mhm.
those are the two main ones that have it. But then the other there's lots of other ad networks, and I don't know what the case is for all of them, but they're all aware of the issue.
Mhm.
Hey Ryan, what's up, man? Good to see you. They're all aware of the issue. So that's something that's, as marketers, like as media buyers, we have to keep asking our network reps,
Mhm.
like, hey, when's that API going to be available? Because the
Mhm.
network reps have a lot of leverage. They can go and ask the dev team, like, hey, we keep getting asked for this. And it makes sense because the conversions are not accurate on iOS devices anymore. And like all the networks know this stuff, that pixels are not working nearly as well as they used to. They all have to have these things set up. So if they don't have it yet, then chances are it's in development. And what you want to do is say, can I have alpha access to it? It's kind of like the keyword, can I have alpha access to it?
What does
And
that mean? I've never actually used that. I mean, I
alpha
know
is,
beta.
yeah, so alpha comes before beta. Like when something is not yet tested enough to go into the beta stage of testing, they call
Uh-huh.
it alpha, and like they might call it early alpha, where it's like, yeah, we just created this, and it's probably buggy, but if you want access to it, we can give you access to it. And you can be one of our early testers. Like TikTok just gave me alpha access to something where it's going to be like, because they didn't have Zapier integration for their version of, as Facebook has lead ads,
Mhm.
where you can get leads directly. Someone can type in their info directly on the ad itself, and then it syncs over. And Zapier has an integration to do that with Facebook, but they haven't had one to do it with TikTok. And TikTok is just rolling out alpha access to that. And they said, hey, do you want to test this with us? And in our case,
Wow.
like they actually said, like you might even get an incentive for you to test this with us. You get early access, and we'll give you a little bit of something to test this with us.
Wow. And I mean, do you have like a private rep over there, or it's just because you asked? Are you spending a ton of money over there to get, um,
Yeah.
like
So usually, the more you spend, the more you get access to these kinds of things. Like we got bumped up to a higher level of rep, and so it does make it somewhat easier to get access. But if you can get access to any rep, like you can start asking for these things and be like, can I get
Mhm.
access to this because I want to help you test it, and then obviously it's beneficial to me too.
Yeah.
So,
I feel
but
like you
if,
just
I
gave me
figure
the
if you
code
don't
to
ask,
yeah.
if you
I
don't
feel like
ask,
you
you
just
usually won't.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. I mean, I feel like you just gave me the code to like the secret menu item, right? That nobody knows about. Just to ask for the alpha version of something. So,
And thank you, Ryan. That means a lot to me. I appreciate
yeah.
that. Ryan and I
Yeah.
worked on a project this year, and it was fun to work with him. And well, may do something again
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, Ryan says Sunny is I'll put it up here.
He had a cool
Ryan
play on
says
words with
Sunny
alpha.
Sunny is the alpha of that's right. So Sunny is the alpha of tracking data. I worked with him on a project and he was 100% on point and just crushed it. If I ever get a chance to work with him again, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And Drew says alpha media buyers rock.
Alpha
So
media buyers. Yeah.
I love that. That's a great tip. To ask about, ask to get
Yeah.
alpha access. And
Remember
yeah.
when like you and I talked about UTM parameters, like how do you do dynamic URL tracking with TikTok? And like it was not public, but I asked the rep and they're like, oh yeah, here's how you do it. And they just gave me the templates to fill in the
Right.
the text templates that'll dynamically fill in your ad campaign
Right.
ID and all of that stuff. And then I just sent you a screenshot of that because like that wasn't public at the time. And TikTok it takes time for them to make the documents and all of that. But the reps often have these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, on Facebook, we can do campaign budget optimization. They're like, oh yeah, we have that. It's just in beta right now. Do you want access to it? I was like, yeah, sure. And then they just enable it. And it's like, oh, wow, that's cool.
And Justin Brooke is always preaching, take time to get to know the reps. And I know sometimes it's annoying
So
because,
true.
right, like sometimes the reps don't know initially what we want, but I think what you're saying too is that just the fact that they're internal and they have access to information, they may not be able to answer all our questions, but this is invaluable.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And when you take that time, and also like when you take their suggestions and then you come back to the next meeting with the rep and you're like, I followed your suggestions
Mhm.
and here's what I found. Here's the data that came back. Like, here's how these things performed. Then they get excited. They're like, oh, wow, here's the data. Let me review that with you. Or that looks different than what I expected. Let me take that to a higher level rep
Mhm. Mhm.
and get some more feedback for you. Let me give you access to this next feature that we've got in development. Like, that's when they get access, they get excited and they get even more proactive in working with you
Mhm.
because they see that you're actually taking action on things. And whereas a lot of people don't, and they almost kind of burn out. The reps almost kind of burn out because they're on these calls where they're just kind of following their script a lot of times and just giving data to people, hoping that the media buyer or that the advertiser, because it's not always like a professional media buyer like you are, like Ryan or like Drew. Oftentimes it may just be the client themselves trying to run ads themselves, and then they don't take action on anything, and then
Mhm.
it's just not fun for the rep. So when you're one of those people that really embraces what they have to tell you and you're excited about it, they get excited too.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes maybe us pro buyers are not great either because we sometimes immediately dismiss what they say.
That could be
Because
true.
you because we do, we think we know what we're doing, and I think to be fair, yes, I understand that a lot of time the reps are given from up high. This is what you have to push, but I think a good media buyer is able to discern, it's because a lot of times too, sometimes they'll tell me something and I've already tested it and I know it didn't work for this particular campaign. So that's sometimes why I dismiss it, but I still try and be open to testing something. I'm just not going to go all in. So if you have a very tiny budget and they tell you to do something, I'd be hesitant to do it just because that's all you have, right?
Yeah. Oh, I always suggest just starting really small. Like on
Mhm,
Facebook, a lot of times I'll do like
mhm.
$15 a day because at first I'm just looking to see, does this thing get any kind of actual CTR,
Exactly. Yeah.
And my rep doesn't really like that I do that, but because she wants me to use experiments, and I am going to experiment with their experiments feature some more because it's
Right.
it's it's like a
But
new
you're
version of their
you're
old split
assessing,
test.
right? Like you're not just following
Yeah.
blindly what they say. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a very, you can do things on a very small scale to see, like, does this have any kind of impact on the audience? And if it does, then you can ramp up spend.
Yeah.
And there's a particular way I do that, and like I'm always refining ways to do that too. But
Yeah. So what about the email situation? What's your KPIs for the success of an email? Because we're not going to be able to, I mean, first of all, open rates were never 100% anyway. Just, like just in case
oh
people
yeah.
didn't know that, the open rates were never completely accurate anyway. But what's your KPIs for an
Mm.
email now that we know we really can't be relying on open rates?
Yeah, like you said, open rates have never really been totally reliable, and there's even more to that, which we can talk about, which is like just the fact that someone opened an email doesn't mean anything on its own because most people just scrolling through their email, like they're clicking on a bunch of things, and that open is only a split second or it's 1 second while they just look at a bunch of things. It's not like a real, I opened this, I'm like looking at it and I'm reading it. So other types of engagement are more valuable than that. Clicks and replies to the email. Like, one thing with email is that people are just constantly, we consider it as marketers oftentimes like a broadcast medium, but I like to go like bi-directional. Just like if I'm emailing you or if I'm messaging you in Slack, I'm usually like looking for a reply. And Dean Jackson is really good at this, where he's like short, pithy, expecting reply. There's certain emails that he does like that, but every email you can ask people to reply, and that's one of the things that actually boosts open rates over time, because then the inbox placement gets a lot better
Hmm.
when an internet service provider, an ISP, notices that emails that this sender sends tend to get replies. For any person who replies, that person is most likely to see that coming into their primary inbox after that, because then it's like a conversation that's happening. It's not just broadcast email.
Yeah.
So the more we can all, even though we can't measure open rates accurately, we can be a lot more assured and rest more peacefully at night knowing that a lot of people tend to reply to our emails. And to some degree, it's wishful thinking because a lot of people never will. But you can also start to understand, like, these are the people who are actually responsive because they actually do respond.
Hmm. Is there a way to measure? I mean, I was always curious about that because I love asking for replies, but I've never seen an email system where, it actually gives me, an engagement rate basically on my emails. Usually you just get the open, the link clicks, unsubscribe, complaints.
Yeah, most of them don't. Most of them just give you those really standard kind of numbers, and then you have to dig into it a little bit more on your own and see like what is actually happening with the response rates, and
Yeah.
just over time also what's happening. And if I segment like this, then these are the numbers, or how they tend to work out.
Right.
So there is some lifting that you need to do oftentimes, and most of the email platforms aren't that good. I think ActiveCampaign does give some more stats.
Mm-hmm.
HubSpot, even though it costs a fortune, doesn't give you a lot. I think last time I mentioned HubSpot to Justin, he was like, he got pretty heated about it. Like apparently he wrote them a letter about how much he hated their software.
Oh my goodness.
And then he took skills off of their software. So
But so do you have any, secrets in terms of how you measure that? Because, if you have a list of 100,000 people, how can anybody realistically measure, the replies on there unless you're like literally just, your customer service is like, just trying to keep a tally or something.
Yeah, well, certain platforms can actually segment based on that. ActiveCampaign, I'm pretty sure, is one where you can. I don't think HubSpot can do it, so I've asked them before. So yeah, you may want to consider switching platforms to something that gives you more insights into email, and also just gives you more ability. Because if you can segment based on replies, then that's powerful, for example, and you can do that in ActiveCampaign.
Oh, okay. I haven't used that before. I'm going to check that out in ActiveCampaign.
Yeah, it's amazing, like, because it's actually an affordable platform. I don't get paid anything for saying this stuff, but it is affordable platform compared to most. Like you actually start in the range of like the MailChimps and other stuff. They actually have been doing a promo where they say MailChimp might be getting sold. We'll give you the same plan in MailChimp at the same cost, and come over to ActiveCampaign. They've been running that, so it's kind of a limited time thing. I don't know when that expires, but there's so much segmentation that you can do in ActiveCampaign. That's kind of that is their competitive advantage. That's all the automation and segmentation you can do.
What I've done in some other non-active campaigns is tried to program in, the rating. Like a lot of times you can customize this is, a hot lead or not, or you can end up having a score between 1 and 10. So I've tried to do it that way, not very successfully, but that's just sort of the way I've tried to do it in the past, in a non-active campaign. So at least I know these people are, it's like you said, it's not just, it quickly went across their screen and that counted as an open. They actually took a positive step here.
Yeah, you just hit on something really powerful too, which is lead scoring. So if you can dig into your data and say these are the people that buy, and that's not usually hard to do because you have a list of buyers, and then you start to look at their actions, and then like in our case, like we have free response questions, like the length of answers can matter. There's a lot of different things that they can do on a site that can matter, and you start to say like these people bought and these are the actions they took. Now you start to compare that with people who didn't buy. And then you look for the differences, and if somebody's taking an action that correlates with the difference, meaning they bought, then you can add that to your lead scoring model. And then as people go up in lead score, you can start to segment and alert yourself about that to say, that person is showing signs they might be becoming a buyer, and they might need some help along that journey to actually become a buyer faster or cheaper than if we just let them do it on their own. Because if we just leave them alone, they may never buy. Not that you want to harass them or bombard them with emails or anything, but like just reaching out and seeing if they might need help based on where they are. Sure. The lead scoring models can be, really powerful. You just have to kind of go on a data treasure hunt, as I say, and look, like, what is it that actually correlates with them buying?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of us don't use, like you said, we don't use the lead scoring part of it, probably because also it takes some time to set it up, and then you have to figure out how you want to define everything. But I'm going to go back and take a look now a bit closer now that you've mentioned that.
It's work. There's no doubt about it. But anytime I'm faced with something like that, I think, all right, well, most people aren't going to be willing to do this. So if I can get this to work, which a lot of things don't end up working, but if you can get something to work, you're willing to put in the time, then you're going to have an advantage versus the competition oftentimes.
And how do you measure, like, what's the best way that you set up analytics for from different traffic sources? I if I can't afford like a Segmetrics or something like that, then I just do separate funnels. But I don't go crazy. Like, I'll do, this is Facebook, this is YouTube, this is, I don't create a separate funnel for each ad or something like that. But
Yeah. One thing I do, like, let's say you want to share a landing page.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, it may be good to have different landing pages because some traffic sources are very different than others. Like YouTube, they've already consumed some amount of video, and so you could have like a shorter landing page or something that just looks different and maybe has a video on it instead of something with Facebook. You may not have a video on that one, and it's a somewhat different format. But if you were going to have the same landing page, then you can do it with UTM parameters. Well, UTM source is going to be YouTube for one, YouTube campaign, whereas for a Facebook campaign, the UTM source is going to be Facebook, and it's going to come to the same landing page. But if you're capturing and syncing the UTM parameters from that page into your CRM, then you can segment based on the UTM parameters.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really helpful. And
That's
if
what
you
I
just
do.
Google, again, for a non-coder person like me, you can just Google UTM parameter or UTM builder, and there's a whole bunch of free ones that it's very easy. You just plug in the data that you want there. My
Oh yeah,
suggestion too is to keep a reference sheet, like a Google sheet or spreadsheet, or something like that, where you keep the naming, so that, if you're putting in the name of the campaigns, it's always the same, so that your data will match up. Because I think it's case sensitive too, isn't it? Or is it not?
UTM parameters. Well, case sensitive in what
In
sense? I
that,
mean,
if I
it's gonna.
name it flower shop campaign with a capital F and a capital S, would that come in as different from flower shop with all lowercase?
Yeah, it will in Google Analytics. It'll show
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah.
So I
So I
just,
like to keep track. So I'm always using the exact same names. So
yeah,
when it does come through, I don't have like 10 different categories. That's actually all the same thing.
yeah. No, you're right. And in our case, HubSpot is case sensitive as well. So I just keep everything lowercase for the lead
Mhm.
source. So
Mhm.
like lowercase Facebook, lowercase YouTube, etc. And that
Mhm.
it'll match up with the field values in a CRM, and it'll not cause an error because
Sure.
we had that issue before, and I had to sync them all and
Mhm.
standardize them all.
So you have them. So when it comes into your CRM, like, are you just keeping that as a last click, and then does it get overridden? So if somebody clicks on a Facebook post and then they went over and clicked on a YouTube ad, so now all of a sudden the source has changed to YouTube. Does that overwrite in your CRM, or do you keep a historic? I don't even know how you could do that. Like, keep a history of all the
It's a
sources,
good
the traffic
question. So
sources.
I want to store first click of where they came from, and then after that, I monitor if something's getting overwritten. And how you would do that would be different depending on the CRM and how the automations are set up. But I actually have two different sets of your UTM parameters.
Hmm.
One, I just call it, so like you have UTM source, UTM medium, UTM content, etc. And then I just have versions of those parameters that are called new UTM source, new UTM medium, new UTM content, etc. And so when new parameters come in, they only get written to the new one, which is
Okay.
what's called new UTM source, new UTM medium, etc. And then I have an automation that looks at it and says, do we already have first click parameters stored for UTM parameters? And if they're already written, then it's not going to overwrite them. It's going to prevent that. So you really want to have two sets, like the new one and then the
Oh.
current one. And then you sync to the new, like what's called new UTM, whatever it is, new UTM source, new UTM medium, all of the new ones. And then you have an automation look and see, do we already have first click parameters stored? Because if we don't, then I'm going to write those in there. If we do already, then I'm not going to write those in there.
Okay, so we just have to take, and again, because I'm not a coder, and I like I said, I usually just use these free tools. So when you say new UTM, like, you're literally putting the word new in front of new
Yeah,
UTM
yeah.
underscore
I name
source,
it. I name it new UTM source, new UTM medium, new
an
UTM content,
underscore.
new UTM
Do you
campaign.
put an underscore between new and UTM, or just
Well, in your CRM, it doesn't matter. You can name it
okay?
however you want to.
It didn't even occur to me that I could, like, rename those. So
Yeah, because you're talking about the property or the field name in your CRM, so you can name that however you
yes.
want to. As far as URL, you have to use UTM underscore source or UTM underscore medium. And so like that has to be standardized for Google Analytics.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's not going to read it correctly.
Okay, I might have to ask you to give me an example, and then I can post in the description for everyone, just to
Sure.
I'm trying to get my head around how you would do that. I think it's really smart, but I
Yeah.
just don't know. Yeah, I'm just in my head, I'm going like, okay, but how would I like, what's the actual string, to put through? So
So
that's
on
really
your,
interesting.
I mean, your campaigns are going to change. It's going to come across with the same UTM parameters as always, right? But on the page, when you're grabbing the UTM parameters and then having some code that's going to sync that into your CRM, they just need to sync into the new UTM parameters in the
Okay.
CRM, so that the CRM logic, meaning an automation that you build separately, can
Oh,
look at
okay.
those parameters and say, do we already have UTM parameters that have come from this person before?
I got it. Okay.
Basically, has this person opted in before? Because you want to
Yeah.
store, in our case, we're just discussing an example, and this is how I do it. First opt-in UTM parameters. I also set up first click logic, but that's separate. Like we're just talking about an example with first opt-in.
Right. So yeah, so the logic will be, does this field call new UTM source exist? Is it empty or does it have a value in it? If it's empty, write to it. If it has a value in it, don't overwrite that. Just put that in the regular field called UTM source.
The ones that are labeled new,
Yes.
I let those be overwritten because it's just the latest one that has come in. But
Oh,
what we don't
okay.
want to happen, like if you're trying to do first opt-in attribution, like you're trying to store the first place that someone opted in from and keep that constant in your
Mhm.
particular contact record for a
Mhm.
given person, then you as soon as that gets set, you want to protect it. So
Yes.
you can overwrite the ones that are called new, but then you always want to check, do we already have this stored for the first opt-in? Because
Right.
we always want to preserve, like, where did they first opt in from?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, because that's
And
what I want to know. Where did they originally
yeah,
come from? And
yeah,
then what was the last thing they did before they bought?
yeah. And so you can set those things up
Okay.
depending on how you want to track it.
Okay. I mean, I love to go into all these little details. We might have lost everybody because we went too techy, but it's that no, I think that's really smart because I hadn't thought about that. So
Ryan, was
that's a
that too
really good
techy?
idea.
I
Yeah.
don't know if he's still with us, but
No, that's really smart. Like just to put that in there. I mean, some Wicked reports, for example, I know we'll tell you first, last click, all these other different ways of looking at the data. But if you can't afford that or you don't have enough traffic to have one of those tools, this is kind of like a way to do it. So yeah.
yeah, I mean, we have some of these other tools, but they don't. For one thing, I don't think I haven't seen them be as accurate as CRM tracking. Like I go back to the CRM as like a primary source of truth,
Mm-hmm.
and then everything else, all the other tools are confirming tools. And in
Yeah.
some cases, the CRM data is messed up. Then those tools help fill in the data,
Right.
fill in holes in the data. But
Right.
ideally, and how I like to do things is have the CRM data be the primary source of truth, and then
Mm-hmm.
combine that with other data to form a fuller picture.
Okay.
So anything you can possibly set up in your CRM for tracking, that's
Mm-hmm.
great. It's great to be able to do that.
Now, going on the other side of it, a lot of us are bringing in, maybe we are able to figure out all of this and bring in all this data. And what I find also happens is now that we've got the data, we don't know what to do with it. And we have all these fields, we know, and then like, so what's your suggestion there, to make just a way to have like a practical interpretation of it?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Like you get so much data, and then like, okay, what do I do with this, and how do I use it? And that always has to start with a question. Like, what question am I trying to answer?
Mm-hmm.
So, am I trying to answer the question of like, how much do I pay per lead from Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
or which lead sources convert for me and which ones don't? I mean, it just
Mm-hmm.
depends on what the question is, and then you can combine the data. But oftentimes, you're going to be pulling that data into a spreadsheet and combining it with your ad spend
Mm-hmm.
per campaign, per ad set, per ad, whatever, however granular you want to get.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're combining your CRM data, like which is all the conversions, with your ad spend data, then you can start to see like what's actually working for me and what's not working for me, and then project like what might work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that's a broad strokes answer, and then it just depends what the actual question
Yeah.
is.
Well, that's a good I think that's good advice to think about keep the end in mind. I forget who said that, but start with the end in mind, right? Whether that's Stephen
Yeah.
Covey, yeah, or,
Yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
Stephen Covey and lots of other people have said that, right?
yeah,
And then
yeah.
our friend Justin has said that all these spreadsheets and all the tools are basically pimped out CSVs, and he's true.
That's right. And I think that's important to remember. It is because I think sometimes we get so excited because we have all this data, and we have to be disciplined enough to say, well, wait a minute, what am I looking for? And then go and take a look at the data that you have. What's the answer? What's the answer that I'm looking for? What's the question I need answered? Um, Really quick, what is your I'm going to ask you this for a bigger company and then for a smaller company. If it's like a solopreneur, kind of startup, what is your preferred or recommended tech stack in terms of setting up, tracking and analytics and things like that?
Yeah, wow, it just depends on the company, but um, Google Analytics is a foundational piece that all of us really need to have. It's free for one thing, and it's very powerful. GA4 has even more power to it, and there's a lot of details about that I'm still learning too. But I suggest installing both the old version of GA, which is called Universal Analytics, and also GA4. Like, have them both running on your same
Okay.
website, meaning you set up both pixels,
Okay.
and you have to get GA4. You actually have to set up a new property within your account, and then you have to take the pixel or the ID from there, and you can do it in Google Tag Manager if you want to, but have them both running, because GA4 has more other insights than Universal Analytics. It's not like a minor upgrade. Like, they changed a lot of things in it. It actually looks different even when you go in the interface. The whole menu is different, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
have both of those running, and then set up as far as tech stack. You definitely want to be doing something to capture UTM parameters, as we talked about, on your site, and sync them into your CRM. And as far as tech stack, Google Sheets, such a like Swiss Army knife tool. Again, it's free unless you're going to pay for like enterprise version or something like that. But for most purposes, the free version is fine. And then ideally, you can get if you want to go more, you can get an attribution tool, whether it's Wicked Reports or other things. It's somewhat optional depending on the business you're in. I started using Google BigQuery, which is a cloud data store, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to add data into, and
What's it called again? Google.
Google BigQuery.
Oh, okay. I've
Hey
never
Keith,
heard of it
good to see you,
before.
man. Keith is another analytics ninja, and also Google Ads ninja. Yeah, as he's saying, GA4 is a pretty new platform, but it is a whole new platform. It's powerful, but a lot of us are still learning all the power that it has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Google BigQuery is a cloud data store. It's like a database in the cloud. We've had databases, relational databases for years and years and years, decades, but this is like the next evolution of that, where you can have huge amounts of data and you don't have to host that data yourself or maintain your own servers. Google will do that for you, and you just pay them in a couple of different ways with the storage and the usage. And it's a usage model.
Okay. Is it
And
expensive or
it's
is
not
it
expensive. It's
okay?
actually, I thought it might be at first, and then I started using it. I'm like, this is really not. And they give you a whole chunk of usage for free, so you don't actually
Okay.
even pay for a while.
Wow.
There's definitely a learning curve there, but being able to sync your ad data into a platform like that gives you more power, because then you can get that into your Google Sheets to work with that data, like current ad spend data, and you can use it in another analytics tool. Like, some people might be using a true like business intelligence tool, what they call BI tools. It just gives you like a central point where you can then pull out data into different ways of analyzing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a lot of different connectors now to be able to pull data from Facebook, or TikTok is one that's coming out. There's a lot of every ad platform has connectors, and these other third-party companies that supply these connectors. So Data DDO is one. Windsor.ai is one I'm testing right now. There's a lot of them. A lot of these companies tend to have like somewhat buggy connectors. You have to test, see which one actually works for you.
Ask for the alpha version.
You don't want an alpha version of a
No?
connector because it's such a pain if it doesn't work correctly.
Okay.
You want your data to sync correctly into whatever place you're going to sync it to.
Okay.
So some people have connectors and they use them like Supermetrics. They'll sync directly into Google Sheets, but there's a lot of issues with the reliability of it. So
Mhm.
ideally, you can go with a data store.
Okay.
There's a Google BigQuery is only one data store. There's Amazon Redshift. There's Snowflake. There's Panoply. There's a bunch of them now.
Okay.
But it's a like if you want to stay in the Google tech stack, because a lot of the products I'm naming are Google, then it's a really nice tool.
Okay. And how would you change the tech stack for a larger company where you're running hundreds of thousands of dollars of ad spend a month?
Yeah, in that case, I would definitely have some of those more advanced tools like the BigQuery,
Mhm.
and I would have you're analyzing data more often. That's one of the key differences. So you want to have as much automated as you can. You want to have automated pulling of data from your ad networks
Mhm.
into a data store, and then automated pulling of that data from the data store into analytics tools,
Mhm.
whether it's Sheets or other things. Like I'm testing one now called Action Desk, which is they built their own spreadsheet solution so that they can do native integration with BigQuery and other sources so that they can actually has native integration with HubSpot so it can pull data directly from HubSpot.
Uh-huh.
So if you're using HubSpot, that's one I suggest checking out. But yeah, like when you're dealing with big companies, it's just so much more volume of everything and so much more speed that you need. So
Yep.
you just want to automate all the different pieces. So you
Mhm.
want to have Zapier and somewhere in your tech stack to sync data, back to Facebook and back to Google and whatever. So you're just automating all the different pieces, really.
Okay. Oh, well, the time has just flown by. I have to run soon, but thanks again for
Yeah,
stopping
me too.
by. And, again, I know this was, we kind of just really went down the rabbit hole in terms of some techie stuff, but it's, but the thing is, I think that's the reality with a lot of things today. Even like setting up your Facebook ads, it's gotten much more technical. And
It
because of all the
has.
challenges we have, analytics is much more technical, and we can't pretend it's not. It is what it is. That's why you need to get experts to help you if you just really can't figure it out. Um, but I think that's just our new reality.
Yeah, it is. I came from a software engineer background. I was a techie, still am a techie, and then at first I didn't know like if I was going to be able to use that background in marketing, but then I very quickly
Mhm.
learned how technical a lot of marketing is to be able
Yes.
to set up and measure things and to see actually what's working, which is really the cool part. You get to the really cool stuff when you can see what's working and what's driving response. And then you feel like, oh wow, that's really cool that I just learned that. Now let me test more of those types of creatives or headlines or whatever. And so
Yes.
when you actually enjoy marketing too, and you can go and work with people that are writing the copy or making the videos or whatever it is, or even if it's in your case or my case, like I do a lot of the things too because I need to be like a full stack marketer.
Hmm.
Then you get the insights and then you can go work on that stuff and you feel a lot less stressed because you feel like, and not just feel, that the data is saying that kind of thing, that kind of angle works.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like that becomes the hub. I think if you can have a really strong system that gives that, like you said, you can rely on. That's the problem. Is we don't know what we can rely on. Every area in the company needs to know this. Like they all want to be your best friend. The copywriters, the marketers,
I
the
do.
product people, customer
Yeah.
service, even they all need to know this information. So it really is very important.
Yeah. I love in the lean startup movement, they talk about the build, measure, learn loop.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people like building things, but then they don't measure well. So then they don't learn that much. And then they just build more stuff. And at some point, I mean, the wheel doesn't work when you're not measuring things well because you're not learning as much.
Hmm.
But then you're going and building more, and then at some point you just have built so much stuff, but don't really know what's working and what's not working. Even when something's working, a lot of people will tell me like, it's working, but I'm not really sure what's working. And so if I take anything out, I'm scared the whole thing's going to fall apart.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. I hear you. I
And
think,
that's
yeah.
that's its own form of stress.
That is that's I think that's a great point to leave off to, to sign off on, because you hit the nail on the head. A lot of us are stuck in that cycle, some more than others, but right, because we're all about let go, launch it. And like you said, we're not measuring, so we don't really know what's working, what's not working. So our answer is launch something else, keep going, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that's personality type driven, so it just depends. But like my tech stack is not, and my setup is not perfect either. I'm constantly finding ways and to make it better and working on that. So it's not like I have it all dialed in either. We're all learning from each other and we're all testing things and sharing with each other what works and what doesn't. So that's partially what makes it fun.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Now, before we leave, if anybody is watching this or listening to this afterwards, and you do have a question that you want Sunny to answer in terms of analytics, do leave it in the comments. He may be only answering it on the Pro League coaching calls. He may have to be in Pro League, but I think I can convince him to come back again on another Friday to kind of go through those answers for us at some point.
Well, yeah, we'll do more of this and it'll be fun. And yeah, if I see a comment on you're going to post this on Facebook, right?
Yes, we are live actually right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
We're live on LinkedIn as well. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So if someone posts a comment, and make sure to tag me so I can see it, so that I don't miss it. But in case I do miss it, you can hit me up on LinkedIn and ask me the question there.
Yep.
But I'm happy to answer the best I can.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, thanks again, Sunny. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Likewise. Bye, Leanna. Happy weekend,
Bye.
and happy
Happy
weekend to
weekend.
everybody watching.